Abracadabra, I sit on his knee. Presto, changeo, and now he is me.
The Uncanny Valley phenomenon is a concept originally proposed by Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori in his 1970 essay Bukimi no Tani, or the Uncanny Valley. He proposed, in regards to robotics specifically, that the more human in appearance a robot becomes, people are inclined to be more and more empathetic towards it. However, at a certain point, when the appearance reaches nearly human, the empathy drops off suddenly into revulsion and uneasiness. This sudden drop is the Uncanny Valley. The name and concept comes from the psychological definition of uncanny, which essentially means a discomfort in the familiar yet uncertain, such as a street corner you recognize, but there's a stranger standing on it. Or, more relevantly, the uncertainty of something that looks familiarly human, but isn't. Now, I'm not a psychologist, and paraphrasing Wikipedia articles can only get you so far in conveying complex scientific ideas. But what I do know is that people have taken this idea of the Uncanny Valley in regards to robotics and applied it to everything, from evolutionary psychology to whatever was going on with Robert Zemeckis for a few years.
There's only one way to go out.
How's that?
Singing!
But undoubtedly the term's most common usage 50 years after its coinage is in regards to horror. Whether it's the nostalgic uneasiness of liminal spaces, to the more visceral feeling you get from images like this, the Uncanny Valley and its idea of something mundane and familiar having something simply off about it is a simple yet versatile method of conveying horror to the point that it's basically the foundation of nearly the entire analog horror subgenre. However, much of this does come in the form of visually uncanny examples, and to a degree I understand why this is the case, as it is the most immediate and striking utilization of it. Yet it's far from the only or arguably most effective way of using it. In recent years, auditory examples have emerged that, to me, elicit far more of a fight or flight response than most images do.
I didn't mean it! I didn't mean it!
God, help me! I'm over here stroking my dick. I got lotion on my dick.
However, that still only scratches the surface, because what I'm really here to talk about has uncanniness baked into every aspect of it. A relic of the analog age reborn in the digital one, where every passing second things just aren't right. From the way it looks, to the way people speak, to even its basic artistic vision embodying the Uncanny Valley better than almost anything I've seen before or since it came back into my memory. Ladies and gentlemen, this is... Possibly in Michigan is a surreal 12-minute shot-on-video short film originally released in 1983, yet received notoriety in online circles in the late 2000s, becoming somewhat of a staple of internet horror, while also, quite frankly, being far better than most of its contemporaries in that sphere. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't some gems from this early age of internet horror, but for every username 666 or body of a pig, there was a Candle Cove Scream episode. If anything, Possibly in Michigan is more akin to the 1989 avant-garde horror film Begotten or the 2005 Aphex Twin music video Rubber Johnny, in the sense that all three were fully produced works made with a specific purpose in mind before being cut down and posted to early YouTube with no context, at a time when the origins of such things weren't readily known or even available. In the case of Possibly in Michigan, the story of its exposure to the internet begins, as these things typically do, on Reddit, where on April 30th, 2015, a post was made to the r/creepy board by user Like My Men. Personally, I like My Men to look like the lead singer of Bucktick, but we don't have to go into that. The post in question simply stated, "Possibly the creepiest thing I've ever watched," along with a YouTube link to a now deleted 4-minute and 42-second video titled Possibly in Michigan excerpt, which itself was uploaded all the way back on April 23rd, 2009 onto a YouTube channel named Cecilia Condit. Remember that name. As for the video itself, the description for the 2009 upload actually sums it up pretty effectively, while also in no way preparing you for what you are about to experience. It simply reads, 2 women are chased through a shopping mall by a cannibal. Speaking from a strictly narrative sense, there actually isn't much more to Possibly in Michigan than this original summary. The film follows two women, our main character Sharon and her friend Janice, as they wander through a shopping mall trying on perfume and having normal conversations about dogs and microwaves, all the while being stalked by someone or something in the background, which, when they notice, makes them say, "Bye-bye." It is admittedly a simple and straightforward plot, and when coupled with the somewhat amateurish-looking visuals I've shown thus far, might have some of you writing the film off as like a film student's first attempt after getting their hands on their first camcorder, but you're wrong. It was actually their second attempt. But make no mistake, because even if it isn't narratively complex, it does still have layers of complexity on display that make the film on a technical and artistic level fascinating to experience and dissect. In a way, it reminds me of the 1977 Japanese film House, in the sense that they are both very simple, conventional, and even generic stories, but both are told in the least conventional way possible, with House being the most by-the-numbers haunted house setup to the point that even its characters are named after their most basic character traits, with Sweet being sweet, Gorgeous being the pretty one, and I'll give you 3 guesses what the girl named Kung Fu does. And yet, with the basic setup, House manages to be one of the most visually insane films I've ever seen, with man-eating pianos and flying severed heads. And while Possibly in Michigan never reaches that level of insanity, it is similarly a conventional story elevated by its non-conventional approach in filmmaking. For instance, did I mention this was a musical?
I bite at the hand that feeds me, slap at the face that eats me. Some kind of animal cannibal. Animal cannibal.
If you are familiar with Possibly in Michigan in any way, it's more than likely from the bizarre musical number that opens the film by the name of Animal Cannibal, which even if you haven't seen the film it's from, you've probably still heard elsewhere, considering the fact that on TikTok alone, certain uploads of the sound have garnered as much as 77,000 uses. And on the topic of TikTok, Animal Cannibal isn't the only segment of Possibly in Michigan to be chopped up and repurposed as audio for, I don't know, top 5 things humans weren't meant to see, which when you can do that with multiple parts of the film, tells you we're in for something special here. However, getting back to Animal Cannibal, it really is the perfect tone setter, as right off the bat you are both confused and uncomfortable, while also having no idea where the film is going from here on a basic tonal level. And yet the film manages to keep this feeling for every passing second. From the get-go, things are just off. Whether it's the jarring music with its clumsy synth bass and low-fidelity vocals delivered in an overdramatic way, to the voyeuristic home video quality camera work and quick-cut editing, you almost feel like you're watching Ted Bundy's home movie set to a theater student's first attempt at goth rock. There's an uncomfortable uncanniness to every aspect of the film to the point it feels almost dreamlike. In fact, I'd call it borderline Lynchian in a lot of ways.
Elaborate on that. No.
While very different stylistically and tonally, there were multiple times in watching Possibly in Michigan that I was reminded of the Black Lodge sequences of Twin Peaks, in the general unnaturalness and surreality of the presentation. And that was before this fucking thing walks into view.
Oh, hi there. You scared the crap out of me.
This handsome fella, with the energy of someone who saw you from across the bar and really liked your vibe, is referred to in the film as Arthur, yet is credited as Prince Charming, which is darkly comedic considering that yes, this is the aforementioned cannibal from the video's description. He's introduced so matter-of-factly with no build-up or dramatic reveal. The camera just cuts to a brief shot of him walking out of the same elevator Sharon did before cutting away, and as the song fades out, we then get a longer but equally unceremonious shot of him awkwardly walking towards the camera in a sequence that, despite only being about 6 seconds, still feels like it goes on uncomfortably too long. And going back to that Lynchian quality, a lot of the film is presented in this blunt, matter-of-fact way, while still having this unnatural tension, even through admittedly comedic moments, once again has me thinking of Twin Peaks, even though Possibly in Michigan predates it by almost a decade. In any case, as the music subsides, we get a brief narration that essentially acts as a thesis statement for the film.
Sharon attracted violent men. Strangely, she had a way of making the violence seem like it was their idea. Her friend Janice was cut from the same mold. They even liked the same perfume. Arthur, who had been following them closely, was similarly disposed. The 3 of them had 2 things in common: violence and perfume.
Not to get ahead of myself, but Possibly in Michigan is pretty bluntly about violence against women, both narratively and thematically. Keep in mind, we're only a little over a minute in, so thematic elements will become clear as we go on, but the setup of the film is literally two women who fall prey to the predatory whims of a man and his desires. True, in this case his desire is literally predatory, as he wants to, eat them, but it's not hard to extrapolate this into all forms of violence women encounter, where men view them as metaphorical pieces of meat, or in this case, a literal piece of meat. And this line of narration is probably a good point to address the creator of Possibly in Michigan, a woman by the name of Cecilia Condit. Cecilia Condit is a self-described video artist born December 15th, 1947 in Philadelphia. After watching and reading multiple interviews with her, it's safe to say she's a very classical idea of an artist, using the medium of video very much like an abstract painter finding meaning in the strokes on a canvas. When I first revisited Possibly in Michigan, I remember turning to the person I watched it with and saying that it feels like the video equivalent of poetry, where you can kind of piece your own meaning from all these little creative choices. Like when your high school English teacher forces you to figure out what those fucking blue curtains mean.
Teacher, mine are yellow, what do I do?
In the words of the biography section on her website, since 1981, Condit's videos have created heroines whose lives swing between beauty and the grotesque, innocence and cruelty, youth and fragility. Her work puts a subversive spin on the traditional mythology of women in film and the psychology of sexuality and violence. And this mentality is very much on display in Possibly in Michigan, as well as their debut short film Beneath the Skin, which will become more relevant later. But back to Cecilia herself, her website goes on to say, "I consider myself a storyteller working within the psychological landscape of contemporary fairy tales, dreams, and poetry. I explore archetypal themes where my characters are often shaped by violence, basic cold-heartedness, and trauma."
I think when I started making work, I had stories that I had to say because I had to figure out how to work my way through life. And now I think what's happened is I build up a body of work that has to do with the narrative of my work itself and my life itself.
She very much deals in the realm of femininity and the violence around it, and watching her in interviews, I have to admit she's a very fascinating woman. She's also, and I mean this as a compliment, I swear, fucking weird.
Do you like scary movies or things that are scary?
No, I don't. I'm very sensitive to scary. I get frightened very easily.
And you make stuff that's scary because?
I'm so frightened.
And those eccentricities bleed into her art pretty effortlessly in a way that's really interesting to see. There's an almost John Waters quality to her work in that it has a genuineness and vision that can only be achieved by unabashedly weird people making unabashedly weird art. And I mean that with absolute love and sincerity.
Kill everyone now!
And I know that David Lynch meets John Waters is a hell of a bar to set, and there's probably also something to be said about the fact that the only people I can think to compare this outwardly feminist woman's work on the topic of femininity and violence is a gay man and, well, whatever the fuck David Lynch was. But you know what? I'm sticking to it. Possibly in Michigan is like if John Waters made a David Lynch film. There. That's my Letterboxd review sorted. And on the topic of John Waters, similar to some of his early work, there's what I'd call a deceptive amateurness to Possibly in Michigan. On the outside, I think people may view the home video quality visuals and the strange dialogue and over-the-top performances, which on the surface can come off as messy or even childish. Yet if you allow yourself to absorb what it's offering on an artistic level, you begin to notice an intricacy to every artistic decision made, from the timing of the edits to the composition of the shots. Take, for instance, in the conversation that follows the opening narration, Sharon and Janice discuss perfume.
This one here smells great. Which one?
Now, ignoring the nightmare fuel in the background there, the dialogue is clearly recorded entirely after the fact and is stilted and strange, which might seem like a mistake until you notice the actresses' performances are equally exaggerated, showing this was a deliberate choice. And I think a good one, because once again, it enforces this deeply uncomfortable tension in that the conversation and how it's handled is so uncomfortable already, yet attempts to distract you from the visual of this horrifying thing being so close to them, which in turn attempts to grab your attention away from the conversation, leading to a Hitchcockian bomb under the table sequence while the people at that table discuss putting a dog in a microwave.
Smells like Mother's crazy sister Kate.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, I do. It smells so good. She couldn't have been that crazy. I don't think so. Oh, you don't think so, huh? No. Well, she put her poodle one time in a microwave oven. To eat it? Yeah.
The brief shot of raw chicken being butchered is placed just before the line "to eat it," as if to subconsciously put that idea in your head before it's even said. There's very clear intent to all of these strange decisions that really add to the experience if you allow yourself to be at the mercy of the film. Even the poor video quality, which, while yes, was probably more so a limitation of consumer cameras at the time, does legitimately add to the atmosphere of the film, even if indirectly, adding this uncomfortable voyeuristic feeling to otherwise innocuous shots, and even going back to the Uncanny Valley element. The analog noise, in my opinion, actually elevates Arthur's appearance to something genuinely inhuman, with the graininess blending the already unnatural features of what is actually just the rubber skin of a dental mannequin and smoothing them over until they are essentially only suggested. There are several points where it just doesn't look like he has eyes, and the gaping mouth loses all detail so that it's just this black hole in the middle of his face.
I knew Arthur was terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, he's actually more terrifying now than he was then for some reason. It's something harder for me to grasp that this cannibal should have a constantly open mouth.
And as the conversation degenerates further and further,
To eat it? Oh no. No, 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 silly. To dry it. But it exploded.
you find yourself put between the contrast of the slightly comedic absurdity of what they're talking about, superimposed against these nightmarishly Lynchian visuals. It's like when you're so uncomfortable you can't help but just start laughing. Cecilia has somehow managed to put that feeling to film.
Congratulations!
Anyway, in the interest of not analyzing every frame of this film, we move on past the conversation to the second musical number dubbed the Perfume Song, which, while not as catchy as Animal Cannibal, is where the film gets a bit more experimental with its editing, cutting to seemingly random shots of a building collapsing and a picture burning, which has an unnerving effect when accompanied by the waltz-style beat of the music.
She must have been out of her head.
While I don't want to explain the symbolism of every shot, as you should really go watch the film yourself and find your own interpretation, I will highlight these few shots of a TV screen playing previously filmed footage, which to me feels as though the film is forcing us as an audience into the same voyeuristic perspective as Arthur, creating a second degree of separation between us and Sharon and Janice, almost as a way of dehumanizing them, especially as Arthur creeps closer and closer. This song then abruptly ends, and we're immediately treated to the comeback of the century in the form of a reprise of Animal Cannibal.
How do I meet the strangest men? They always seem to find me. Remember that time way back when I kissed a guy who ate his women friends?
In all the years we've been on the air, we've never come across a character quite like Ira Einhorn. At times, he seemed like a drugged-out hippie lunatic. Other times, he seemed like a visionary genius who would take the world by storm. But no one could have expected that he would see the world while he was running from the law.
It's at this point that I want to relay a bit of context I've been withholding thus far, but does recontextualize a lot of what's happening in the film, both conceptually and thematically. As I mentioned, the film overall is a statement on violence faced by women and the horrors that can take shape from that trauma. And Cecilia herself, as it turns out, is pulling from a personal aspect of her life to explore this. And while I don't want to spend too long on it given the subject matter, I do think it helps illustrate the frame of mind she was in when making this and what she hoped to accomplish from it. You see, at some point in the late 70s, Cecilia Condit would begin dating this man, Ira Einhorn, a prominent counterculture figure of the 1960s and 70s who was known for his political activism against the Vietnam War and also his staunch environmentalism, even being a speaker at the first Earth Day event in 1970.
Welcome, sulfur dioxide. Hello, carbon monoxide.
However, on March 28, 1979, police would raid his apartment after neighbors complained of a foul odor and the apartment beneath him noticing a strange liquid dripping from the ceiling. 18 months earlier, on September 9, 1977, Einhorn's ex-girlfriend Holly Maddox would go to his apartment in order to pick up some belongings she had left after they had broken up. She was never seen again. The day of the raid, police found her partially mummified body stuffed in a trunk in his bedroom closet. If you're wondering why Cecilia could be with this man and not notice the smell when his neighbors did, another fact I see mentioned is that Cecilia was apparently unaware of the odor as she was on medications that affected her sense of smell, which somehow makes these events so much worse to me. There's actually a 1999 made-for-TV film produced by NBC about the event called The Hunt for the Unicorn Killer, featuring Naomi Watts as Holly Maddox. I don't have any comments on this, it was just too strange a fact not to bring up.
An NBC motion picture event. He inspired millions as the creator of Earth Day. Found the girl of his dreams and killed her.
In any case, the reason I bring this up is that Cecilia decided to process these events and channel them through her art, which is what led to her first film in 1981, Beneath the Skin. Cecilia has been very open about how Beneath the Skin was directly inspired by these events, and it's not hard to see how that inspiration bled through into Possibly in Michigan. Now, I obviously don't feel comfortable cracking jokes at a horrifying event like this, but Cecilia sure does. As while both films share a lot of overlap in their visual style and morbid themes, there's also a hefty amount of genuinely funny black comedy.
And then I feel really angry at him. Not for what he did to her, if he killed her, because that's between them.
Getting back on track, however, with all that context in mind, the reprise of Animal Cannibal makes this theme of violence against women clearer with these shots of Sharon dancing with Arthur while surrounded by people in animal masks. Her deadpan expression as she aggressively moves is genuinely uncomfortable, and I know I've already made the David Lynch and Twin Peaks comparison a few times already, but these shots really remind me of Laura Palmer in The Black Lodge. I know they're visually very different, but I can't help making the connection thematically in my head, especially when it's capped off by this shot of her lying peacefully as an image of a corpse fades in over her in a quite morbid effect.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Now, I want to stop right here because at this point, most people who remember Possibly in Michigan probably don't remember anything past this point. And that's because this is actually where the original 2009 upload ended. And what's fascinating is that even though this is less than halfway through the total runtime, this actually still works as a legitimate ending to the film, and a fairly bleak one too, because after those shots of Sharon superimposed with a corpse, Arthur is shown getting closer and closer until it ends. The implications of this ending are grim and morbid, but they're also made very funny considering the actual ending of this film. As far as the second half of the film goes, I actually don't have nearly as much to say about it, partly because I don't have the memories associated with it that I do with the first half, but also because it takes a definite tone shift from the more playful, creepy weirdness into a more sinister route. It isn't a jarring shift, but it is a noticeable one.
Arthur longed for that sexual scent that smelled like home. He had used so many masks to disguise himself that he had forgotten who he was, who he'd known. He imagined himself a frog transformed into a Prince Charming. He felt the moment he kissed her, he would become the man she would want him to be.
Okay, ignoring the fact that this is apparently what passed for a Prince Charming in 1983, Arthur attempts to enter the home, which causes Sharon to panic and call Janice for help. Something I remember about the original 2009 upload, which was often the case with these creepy internet videos at the time, is that since so many of them were presented with zero context, it allowed all manner of wild speculation, which more often than not blossomed into full-fledged digital urban legends. True, most of them boiled down to the video being cursed or haunted, or the ever-popular "a serial killer did it," such as with the infamous I Feel Fantastic, which had the rumor that the robot was made in the likeness of a murder victim who was buried in the yard shown in the video. Okay. This phenomena is actually something still happening to this day. Remember this audio I played at the start? I have seen multiple posts claim that this audio is sourced from police body cam footage of someone freaking out after attempting CPR on someone caught in a blizzard and having their hands smashed through their frozen ribcage. Which, barring the fact that doesn't make any sense, it is interesting to see in this day and age considering the fact that the actual origin of this audio is readily available. It's from an indie horror game called Julian and Friends. And this wasn't an obscure game. Let's Plays of this game which contain this audio have millions of views. And Possibly in Michigan wasn't immune to this phenomenon either, as all sorts of theories emerged, most of which centering on the film being made by an actual cannibal. Actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf. Which is impressively both stupid and uncreative. But the reason I bring that up is that when Arthur breaks into the house, the footage gets more chaotic and experimental with quicker, more violent editing, a more handheld style of camera work, and this genuinely creepy voiceover that actually would have worked better as an out-of-context creepypasta style video than the first 5 minutes do.
You have two choices. One, I will eat you now. Or two, I will cut your arms and legs off, one by one, and eat them slowly.
The tension built up by Arthur's seeming omnipresent appearance, culminating in this confrontation that, at the risk of repeating myself, feels genuinely like something from a nightmare. Luckily, before Arthur can get a taste of Sharon, Janice comes to the rescue. The ending is where the film comes full circle thematically, and where the choice to use specifically cannibalism as the violence the female protagonists face becomes really interesting. Cannibalism can oftentimes be allegorical for love or general primal desire, especially in a homoerotic sense, be it sexual or otherwise, and the allegory still works with this interpretation, as even if Arthur's cannibalistic urge is allegorical for love, it's still a non-consensual and non-reciprocated desire he is forcing on his victims, and the end result is still violence. But what cements this choice as legitimately clever is that after Janice kills Arthur in order to save Sharon, instead of the film just ending there, Sharon and Janice then proceed to cook and eat Arthur. They eat the cannibal! Take notes, M. Night. This is what we in academia refer to as a subversion of expectations. And while it is admittedly cartoonish with comically large bones being boiled and gnawed on, it's not as if it conflicts with the dreamlike heightened reality the film has established up to that point, and does offer a bit of a palate cleanse to the more chaotic break-in scene that preceded it. And getting back to the allegory of cannibalism as a desire, having these two women share in the act, especially at the expense of a predatory male, does introduce the aforementioned homoerotic element to both the allegory and the film itself that somewhat reinforces aspects throughout the film, such as when they try on perfume, which true could be innocuous on its own, but when the opening narration specifically links perfume with violence, which at this point is established to be synonymous with desire, it does paint it in a different light. And whether you want to see this as a queer narrative, a feminist narrative, or some sort of blending of the two, the film satisfyingly ends with Sharon and Janice disposing of their leftovers, and the credits roll over what's left of Arthur fittingly being crushed in a garbage truck. At the start of this video, I used the word uncanny as a sort of jumping off point in order to discuss Possibly in Michigan, and while I do believe the film's unnatural tone and atmosphere, as well as its unconventional approach to its filmmaking, are what cement the film together as a whole as a work of art, I've also spent a great deal discussing the many different thoughts and opinions that the film arose in me as I watched it. Yes, the film is weird and creepy and unnerving, and yes, even uncanny, but it's also funny and creative and interesting and legitimately impressive for the time it was made and the restrictions that those making it were faced with. In a world where the pinnacle of internet horror and uncanniness is warp-faced jump scares and convoluted lore, sometimes it doesn't hurt to go back and experience things that took a different and simpler approach. And while obviously Cecilia Condit wasn't intentionally setting out to make what we now consider analog horror, Possibly in Michigan is a legitimate precursor to that entire subgenre and has earned its place in the annals of internet history for a reason. Please, if you've been at all interested by anything I've had to say or anything you've seen over the course of this video, please go check out Possibly in Michigan, as well as Cecilia Condit's other works. She is still actively making to this day, and she deserves the recognition. In any case, I'm Oddixx. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Good night.